Today's video is a bit out of the ordinary, and so I'm just going to be transparent up front. There are no games in today's video. This is strictly me sharing 3 decks, talking about the lists, and then doing a bit of a recap from my Gauntlet this past weekend. Now, I shouldn't be saying this up front, let's be honest. I should just post the video and have folks watch it because that helps the view count, yada yada. But I want to be upfront. I want to be honest here. So if you're somebody who just watches for the games that'll return tomorrow, I love you. Thank you. Maybe consider subscribing if you're new and you haven't already. Maybe this honesty earns that. I don't know. But for today's video, I wanted to talk about the decks I took to the Gauntlet because I have said in the past I want to start covering Gauntlet style content a little bit more on the channel. I also think I want to start doing maybe some Lab of Legends runs as well. But the downside is that last Gauntlet, so not this one this past weekend, the one previously, I actually had the opportunity to record my games, but this time around I didn't. I was playing on mobile. I didn't even play them all in one go. I procrastinated the end of my run till like late Monday night even, but I still felt good about my lineup. And even though I couldn't record the games, I did get a Prime Glory. That's my 3rd one in a row. So last 3 weeks I've been nailing them, and I feel like I've got a good handle on you know, what to expect in Gauntlets, how to prepare for them. And so I wanted to share the lineup that I took and my reasoning behind it, including all 3 decks. Deck codes and links to Mobalytics will be in the video description as well. And so let's dive into first the overarching lineup that I took and then each individual list. So the 3 decks that I took were what I call cold-blooded croc here. This is Renekton Sejuani Overwhelm. I'm just a big fan of the list in general right now because it doesn't have many bad matchups. Now, when I say bad matchups, that doesn't mean that it's not going to lose games or anything like that. I just mean that it doesn't have many polarized matchups. It doesn't have many matchups that when you go into it, you're like, this is an auto loss, or I lose this, you know, 70-80% of the time. So I wanted something that was a bit of a safe pick. So this was one of the lists that I took. The other lists that I took were Scargrounds, because I think that this is even better in a tournament environment than it is on ladder, because you can ban certain lists and then you can use it to kind of prey on others. This was my anti-aggro list. Not that the other 2 can't beat aggro decks, but this one, and we'll talk about it when I go through this list, was very much my anti-aggro list. And I'm being honest, it was a bit of ban bait, because I wanted people to ban this so I could play the other 2. I'm more comfortable piloting the other 2. And then the last one was Nasus Thresh, or at least the current iteration of the list that I'm running, because I think this is just a really solid mid-range style deck. It can have explosive starts that can just steal games, and then it's got a really good game plan going into the mid and the late game. So those were the 3 decks that I took. I went 4-0 as far as the rounds are concerned. So this Gauntlet, if you did not participate, this Gauntlet was more akin to what we see in these seasonal tournaments. You bring 3 lists, each player bans a list, and then you have to win 2 games. So you have to win with the 2 lists that are left over, and that wins you a round. So I went 4-0. I dropped 2 games throughout the entire tournament. One of them was a bricked hand with this list. And when I say bricked, I mean I played an Omen Hawk on turn 1 and my mulligan was terrible and my top decks were terrible, and I didn't do anything until round 4 where I played a Renekton. Like, it was a bad, just drew all your top end hand, and even then it was against Lee Sin. We got them down to 4 and it was very close, but it was just a bad draw. The other game that I dropped, I was trying to like make a snack at the same time I was playing, and it was like the middle of the night. It was after midnight, I remember that, and I wasn't paying attention, and I made a couple of really bad play mistakes against Azir Lucian, gave them some free attacks as a result, and you're gonna have a bad time. So those were the 2 games that I dropped, but we're gonna dive into the lists now. So 4-0, only dropped 2 games. List number 1. So this was the one I was most comfortable with because I've been playing it the most. I've featured it on the channel before, so you probably have seen this list if you watch my content. I did not alter it at all for the tournament. This is just the standard what I take up to the ladder. My brain's going faster than my mouth, so I'm stuttering / mixing up words a bit. Ignore that. But we've got Exhaust, Omen Hawk, Aspiring Chronomancer, Still rocking the Ruinous Path. I think I've settled on that. I really do enjoy these in this list because it's a little bit of drain, which can help in the aggro mirrors. It's a little bit of reach against certain control decks, and it's a little bit of card draw, which this deck kind of lacks. So while it doesn't do anything spectacular, the little bits that it does do help shore the deck up, and I've really felt like this actually belongs in the deck after playing with it quite a bit. Ruthless Raider, Troll Chant, Trapper for more big bodies, Sand Spinner to help dictate trades, Renekton, still on the one of Right in Negation. I really wish I could jam in a second one somewhere, but right now just the one of, and then Ruin Runner, Sejuani, Yeti, Battle Fury. If I was absolutely going to, like, I want two of these, I would probably cut a Battle Fury, but it's so hard because this is such a good finisher. It's just the kind of card you rarely want two of in your hand, but you also kind of want to make sure you at least get one a game. So I lean more towards this, because the reason I stick with this 3-in-1 split this way is you always want to be drawing at least one Battle Fury, and you don't always want to draw a right, but going to 2-and-2 in certain matchups makes sense. So I don't know, that's going to be a bit of a meta call when you go into tournaments. Now, I didn't want to just go over lists. I also wanted to talk about potential changes that you could make. So somebody asked me a question in YouTube comments recently, and I wrote an answer, but I'll also give the answer here as well. They were talking about the anti-synergy between Omen Hawk and Chronomancer and what I felt about that. And right now I run these two because of their individual strengths. So what they were alluding to, if you're not familiar, is that you can play Omen Hawk on one, and then if Chronomancer is your play on two, because of Predict, you can be sending away the stuff that you have buffed. Now, there's still a chance that the cards that are shown to you from Predict are some of the buffed ones, like that's fine. But because this shuffles, I think that's something lost on folks, right? You pick a card from among three in your deck. It's not from the top three. And then you shuffle your deck and put that card on top. So if you play Omen Hawk into Chronomancer, you shuffle away your buffed cards, and there's not a guarantee that you'll run into them. And I understand that, but that only really ends up being an issue in games where you start Omen Hawk 1, Chronomancer on 2. And that happens, but it doesn't happen as often as it sounds. And in every other scenario, these cards are individually great. So Omen Hawk, because of its ability to buff things, what you really want is you want it to hit a Raider, and then you can play Raider on 2, because then that takes this outside of Avalanche range as well. And then basically all your units not named Omen Hawk at that point are going to survive an Avalanche, or at least until you start drawing other copies of Ruthless Raider. But like, that's the real key. Omen Hawk's strength is just that it further helps you take control of the board through your big bodies, and so you want to play this card. Now, Chronomancer I really like for smoothing out your draws, because you don't have a lot of card draw on this list, and so sometimes using this to find that card that might be key and then draw it on a turn where you're trying to go into an open attack, or trying to draw it to set up a good play the following round. Maybe it's even defensive, like you want to find a Troll Chant for a key block you're expecting to have to make. I just really like what this card brings to the table, because you don't have a lot of card draw, and so this smooths things out. But they do counteract each other, so you kind of have to take the bad with the good. But personally, I like running this package because their individual strengths, I think, outweigh the rare situations that they don't run into each other. It's kind of, in my mind, it's kind of like when you run an Allegiance deck, like let's say Mist Wraiths, right? But you include Demacia to run 4 cards. Maybe it's like 2 Rangers Resolves, 2 Rallies. Are there times when you're not going to hit your Allegiance? Yes, but the 4 cards that you're adding, I think, make the deck better overall. And so that's what I think is happening here. But the reason I bring this up is because there are some changes that you can make. So if you do not like one side of this or the other, you can modify your package a bit. Pun intended. All right. So Chronomancer, if this is a card that you just like, I want Omen Hawk, I like the buffs, I don't want to run Chronomancer. The card that I would recommend replacing it with would be Starlight Seer. And there's a reason for that. When you look at the 2 drops in Freljord and here, just in general, Shurima, they're not great, right? You've got Avaros and Sentry, which at least it cycles. Maybe that helps a bit, but it's not doing anything for you offensively or defensively. It might buy you a turn. Similarly, Iceveil Archer is a reactive unit, and this is a proactive deck, so I'm not a big fan of that inclusion. Stalking Wolf, maybe I can buy this just because the hair honestly doesn't matter against all your big bodies, and most of your units have Overwhelm, so this might be a close second. I'm not a big fan of Rockhopper right now because there are so many lists that have ways to dodge the Roiling Sands very effectively, so you do not usually get the value out of this that you would want. And so it just comes down to like what's left over, right? We're not really running enough 8 cost cards to consider Scavenger, and so you have Starlit Seer. Now we're not running a critical mass of spells, right? I think there's what, 13 spells, and of those 13 we've got 3 of them that cost 8, and then also a Rite of Negation. So we're not exactly a spell heavy list to get a lot of value from this, but it's still a 2/3 body, so it survives Avalanche. It's an annoying body that people sometimes overvalue, so they might spend more removal on this than is actually necessary. It can become a target, so that's nice. And then it occasionally gives you Omen Hawk style buffs. So this is what I would replace Chronomancer with, if that's something you wanted to do. Now you could go the other direction, which is you could say, okay, I want more of the Predict package. And if you're going to do that, then I would actually say dropping Omen Hawk. So just accepting, okay, we're not going to do the buff thing. You can drop Omen Hawk for the landmark on 1. And then you can keep Chronomancer, and then you could even consider dropping Trapper for Researchers. The idea being that you are going to play Researchers to get +3/+3 on some of your Overwhelm units, and then you use your Predict package to increase your chances of finding them. That one's going to have like really big moments, but is ultimately not going to be as consistent because you might not find the Researchers, and then the Predict stuff is, you know, still okay, but you're not getting that big bang for your buck. And similarly, if you play the Researchers but you don't find your Predict cards, you might never find the +3/+3. So this, I think this version is just overall like you're more consistent, but you could go one way or the other. If I was going to make a change, for me personally, I still think Omen Hawk's really important, so I would consider dropping Chronomancer for Starlit Seer. But this is the list. Now as far as matchups go, this is relatively good against other mid-range lists because a lot of times you're just trading bodies back and forth. It's a bit of a heavyweight fight, but because of your units having Overwhelm, you can usually come ahead in terms of chip damage and wear them down. Because of cards like Exhaust and Sand Spinner, if you're against like Demacian mid-range, for example, you can kind of dictate where the trades go a little bit better so that you can go up in terms of like board presence and value, get those 2-for-1s. And then on the top end, again, Battle Fury is really important. This is a great way to just get that surprise burst damage in that some of the other mid-range lists are lacking. This list can also be good against Lissandra and Trundle, but I just don't like playing the matchup. Like, I know that on paper it's supposed to be good there, but there are times where if you have a bad draw and they hit their combo in 8, you just lose anyway. And if it just feels really bad to lose matchups that you're supposed to win. So during this gauntlet, I banned a lot of Lissandra and Trundle. My ban targets for this event with the lineup that I took, if you're curious, were Freljord based control decks or Targon based lists that I expected to have a lot of like invoke and healing, because again, we're playing proactive lists, and if you can kind of slow them down, make better use of your bigger units, you can usually perform very well. And so I wanted to dodge the things that were going to slow us down the most. So this is this list, and we're going to move on and talk about the other two. So Scargrounds here. This is a list that I took specifically to be my anti-aggro list, and I expected it to be banned a lot. It was banned twice out of the 4 rounds. The Sejuani list was banned once, and the Nasus list was banned once. But I've changed this list since the last time I posted a video on it. I expected to see a lot of aggro in this event. I was correct in that assumption, and so I kind of went overboard. I'm going to be honest, but I'm going to share the list as is, as I took it. But if you name it, like all the go wide removal spells, we were running it, and it worked out. All right, let's go through the list. Crimson Bloodletter. This is just an activator for a lot of your Crimson units. Obviously has Crimson in the title, but it helps get the job done, gives you good solid early game presence. Three Sisters is Not actually a card I'm traditionally a fan of in most control lists, but I like the flexibility here because more often than not, when I'm playing control, I just really wish this was a flash freeze, and flash freeze is just cheaper. And so I feel like I'm running a 4-cost flash freeze for something that 9 times out of 10 is still a flash freeze. But in this list, the flexibility actually matters because I have actually used this for the offensive buff for trades. I have used this for the Entomb because this is a list that just doesn't really have traditional hard removal. And I've used it for the flash freeze. So in this list, I actually really like this for its flexibility. That's a 2 of. Currently 2 Crimson Disciples. Death Lotus, again, we want to ping all of our own units and we want to slow down aggro. So we're running 3 copies of Death Lotus. Troll Chance to help keep those Crimson units alive, keep getting the value out of them. Crimson Curator is like your card draw in this list because we don't have a lot of traditional card draw. So this is the stand-in. Ice Shard, again, ping your own units, does next damage as well, not irrelevant, but also slows down aggro. Scar Grounds, the entire point of the list. You're running all these units that want to take damage anyway, so why not give them tough, and then your value just starts skyrocketing at that point. Avalanche, I told you I was going overboard, I meant it. Blighted Ravine, yep, so you're not miscounting, that's 12 AoE damage effects that I was running. Braum, he likes to take damage. This is a great unit if you have Scar Grounds down because then he can also start removing things as well. It blows my mind that at one point he actually had 1 attack power. But yeah, Braum fits the list. Sometimes off of Curator, you can pull the Crimson unit that deals 1 damage to something but grants it +2/+0. That happened in one of my games. That's also a fantastic unit to pick up for Braum because, again, with his challenger and the fact that he wants to take damage anyway, it starts allowing him to control the board. And then 2 copies of Tarkaz. He's really just backup Vlad and also really good against go wide decks because it makes it more difficult for them to block you effectively. Vlad is your finisher and it's also your stabilizer because you drain the Nexus once he's leveled up and that can help you stabilize. I switched from Scar Mother to Wild Claw for this event because I wanted the guaranteed 7 attack. I didn't want to have to play something and then worry about activating it. I just wanted a consistent threat that I could play late game. And then we end with Basilisk Bloodseeker because this is another threat and also a form of removal and sometimes a great activator as well once you have your Scar Grounds up and running. So this is the version of Scar Grounds I took. I fully admit, again, I went a bit overboard on the anti-aggro sentiment with 12 AoE effects, but it worked. I actually didn't lose with this list whenever I got to play with it, so we'll take that as a sign that it wasn't too terrible. As far as matchups go, you're really good against aggro with this. I mean, that was kind of the point. And you, again, can be good against decks like Lysandra, Trundle Control, or other Freljord Control because you're already trying to hit your entire board anyway. And so if their removal package is centered around that, so, you know, if they've got Withering Whales, they've got Avalanches, whatever, in many ways they're just helping you. But if this deck gets banned, and this is part of the reason why I kept banning Lysandra and Trundle, was that if this deck gets banned, then you have to play your other 2 into it. And again, while the other 2 decks aren't bad against that list, I just didn't want to risk it because that's a deck that has a lot of high roll potential, a lot of blowout potential, because if they have their combo on 8 or on 9, you just kind of lose the game. And I don't want to take that risk. So despite this being relatively good into that, it's not amazing there. So bad matchups. This is actually kind of rough against other beefy mid-range lists, specifically if you don't find your Scar Grounds, because your big AoE effects don't matter as much against, let's say like mid-range Demacia with Garens and Jarvans, for example. You're pinging them, but you're just not getting the value you want out of it. So it can be bad there, but for the most part, this is a pretty well-rounded list right now as far as the meta goes. And then the last list that I took was Nasus Thresh Slay. And this is one that runs a lot of the early Shadow Isle Slay package because I wanted to have explosive starts to put pressure on them and then just kind of finish them with Nasus after you wear them down. It worked out very well for me. So we got 3 copies of Butcher. And then we also have 3 copies of Reaper and Bark Beast. I know some versions also run Dune Keeper, or they might run Dune Keeper in place of this, but the fearsome on this was a bit more relevant because later on with Nasus, if he levels up, it makes it harder for them to block Reaper, but also if you have both on the board at some point later in the game, then they kind of have to pick their poison if they don't have enough blockers, and you should be, you know, trying to facilitate that by pulling things away with Caretaker, pulling things away with Thresh. And so again, the fearsome keyword's relevant. And also this is just a 1-drop that for whatever reason people hate, and they will nuke this over and over. Like I saw both on the ladder recently and in the event, some folks spend premium removal to get rid of this just because it has the potential to scale. So Butcher, Reaper, Bark Beast, Cursed Keeper, and Fading Icon. These are both your 2-drops that you want to find so that you can go into that explosive turn 2. And then also Glimpse Beyond is like an emergency activator for cards like Keeper. But if you're looking for like your opener, you want a Reaper or a Bark Beast on 1. And then if you're attacking on evens, you lead with this. And then ideally, you know, it's a Cursed Keeper, but Icon also works, right? But ideally it's something like Bark Beast into Keeper and then a Butcher on your Keeper, and then you swing for like 10, right? So even if you get the bad version of that, also bad, right? Let's say you have Reaper into Icon into Butcher. Well, then that's still you know, swinging for 2 off of this, 3 off Icon, 3 off of that. So you're still swinging for 8. This is a deck that's very capable of explosive starts. And so you lead with that, and then you continue to pressure while refilling your hand because you do have effects like Glimpse Beyond. Later on, you're going to see we also have effects like Spirit Leech. We draw a lot of cards here. So you lead with an explosive start. You continue the pressure while also honestly just kind of making trades across the board to up your slay count. And then eventually in the like mid to late game, you get Thresh and or Nasus going, and that's your finisher. So all of these, you know, 1s, 0s, and 2s, that's part of your explosive start. So then after that, these are your kind of sustain pieces. So we've got 3 copies of Black Spear. This is very cost-effective removal, and it's very easy for you to activate the if an ally died this round. So this helps you once you've got your explosive start, hopefully nuke their best blockers, continue pressuring. Same thing, Caretaker here, another great activator for cards like Cursed Keeper, but also allows you to hopefully use your saplings to trade into opposing units, thus allowing you to continue controlling the board, generating pressure. Again, if the saplings kill whatever they are challenging, that helps you with your slay count. This is just an amazing card in this list. I currently run a 2 of on the Undying because this is one of those cards that is amazing if you draw one of it, and the minute you draw multiples, it starts to be a problem. It can clog up your hand. This is not an Undying list, but this is a card that is just a great continuous value generator. So I like it as a 2 of because this isn't a list that depends on finding Undying, but it's like a nice to have when you do find it. So this is a 2 of. 2 Rite of Negation because Deny is amazing, but also there are times where you can use Rite of Negation to destroy something like your own Cursed Keeper if you really need to destroy it without any spells on the stack. Granted, it's a very rare niche case scenario where you are spending 4 mana to just sacrifice one of your own units, but I have personally done it, and it can be a big deal. So reasons you might want to do that: if you're playing against lists, for example, that have a lot of burst spells and you don't see yourself using Rite of Negation, it can just get it out of your hand. But also, if you do have a bad draw and you've found 1 or 2 Undyings, and then the only other unit you have on the board is Cursed Keeper, and they start their turn by playing a unit and you expect them to start attacking you thereafter, you're getting kind of low, you need blockers, you can play Rite of Negation with no spells on the stack and still just sacrifice one of your units to give yourself a blocker. So Deny effect is incredibly powerful, but it's also a nice activator for your effects. Spirit Leech is more card draw, more activators, wonderful card. I'll come back to this in a moment. Then we got 3 copies of Thresh because we're doing a lot of slaying, and Thresh also finds us Nasus, which is nice. The Thresh into Nasus attack, so if you have Thresh at level 2, is usually beautiful because a lot of times, again, you can use Thresh to pull away one of the potential fearsome blockers, something with 3 attack power or more, and then free up Nasus to potentially hit. Or even still, you can, make good trades, blah, blah, blah. Like Thresh is amazing in this list. 2 of Atrocity, because turns out Nasus gets pretty big in a list like this. And a lot of times that's a wonderful finisher. You know, if you start with that 10 damage explosive opener, well, at that point, you only have to level up Nasus and then throw him with Atrocity, right? Because if you've leveled him up, he's struck for 10. He's got at least 10 attack power. And the reason I say if you've leveled him up, that's not to say you have to wait to use Atrocity on Nasus, but it's safer because when he levels up, he gets that spell shield, and it's that much harder for them to disrupt your Atrocity play. And so Nasus is the other end of your finishing combo here. It's Atrocity, it's Nasus, it's all the big bodies. Now, Neverglade. This is a flex spot. Somebody asked me about this on my Twitch stream a couple of days ago now, and I have tried a number of different cards here because really what this list is missing is a way to gain health and or more ways to deal direct damage. So I have experimented with this being a one of Ruinous Path because let's be honest, Slay is very easy, but we've already got enough card draw effects, so that didn't feel great when I was using that card in this one of slot. I've tried Withering Whale. Withering Whale is fantastic. That's the other card that I would consider running here because it lets you gain health. It's also great against opposing aggro decks. Withering Whale, fantastic choice. I like Neverglade though because it eats removal. I mean, it eats removal, or it does everything you want it to do. We want to deal direct damage. We want to gain health. Neverglade certainly helps you do that. And then also it eats removal because when people see this come down, they're like, oh wait, that's really bad for me in this deck. So as a one of, it's been fine. The few times I've played it, it's actually been outstanding in this list. It's won me a couple of games. It won me one of the games this list was playing during the event, but even just generally on the ladder, it's been very, very good for me. So right now I run this as a one of Neverglade, but depending on the meta you expect or your own comfort, Withering Whale is another fantastic option here. You can do something like Ruinous Path. Like I said, I just wanted to give myself more ways to punch in a little bit more direct damage, and I also wanted to give myself some ways to stabilize because we don't have really any other life gain in this list. So that's this list. As I said before, deck codes for all 3 decks will be in the video description. I believe there's one more gauntlet left before the seasonal last chance gauntlet. Oh wait, we can actually go check that now. If we come in here. So yeah, standard gauntlet, best of 3, gates open in 2 days. Should be the last one because the last chance gauntlet is in 10 days. So here are my 3 weeks in a row prime glories, in case you think I'm making it up. There they are. So maybe you want to use one of these decks for the upcoming gauntlet. Maybe you want to use my exact same lineup. Have at it. It's been successful for me thus far. If you were looking to run different decks, I think Lee Sin Zoe is also really strong right now. Just like in general in the current meta because it's got some pretty solid matchups. And there's a few others there as well, but this is what's been working for me. So anyway, if you made it this far, I appreciate you. Thanks for watching my non-gameplay video. Thanks for dealing with me like huffing and puffing through this. I can feel my voice starting to give out, which is a bit concerning because I've got an interview I'm doing about my old artifact days later today. So whenever somebody contacted me about, when I was casting artifact, and they're kind of doing like a post-mortem about the game in general, they're going to post it to some esports YouTube channel thing, blah, blah, blah. Whenever it posts, I'm sure I'll share it on Twitter. But anyway, I have that later tonight and I can feel my voice going out. So I need to go drink some tea, I think. But anyway, I'm ranting. I love you all. It's been a crazy day. My mind is a bit scattered. Thanks for watching. Until next time, may you walk on warm sands.